This will blow your mind. The 1980s weren't just about big hair and cassette tapes. On Britain's roads, it was an era of square cab legends, rugged hauliers, and trucks that had more character than half the cars beside them. But here's the thing, many of these machines have vanished, but the memories of them still thunder through service stations and classic shows today. Let me show you the 15 trucks we miss most from the 80s in the UK. 1. Ford Cargo. When the Ford Cargo rolled onto UK roads in 1981, it looked like something from the future. Patrick Lequemont's sleek design was a world away from the square boxes Britain was used to. For once, a lorry looked stylish, but the Cargo wasn't all about appearances. It was versatile, built in everything from nimble 7.5 tonners to full-fat 38-ton Arctics. Fleet managers loved it because parts were plentiful, and drivers enjoyed the modern cab that didn't feel like punishment. And here's the thing, pulling up at lights next to a Bedford TK, you couldn't help but smirk. The Cargo looked fresher, sharper, and cleaner, like it had ironed its shirt that morning, while the TK looked like it had been dragged out of a hedge. If you think the Cargo was sharp, wait until you see Bedford's next move. Stick around and hit subscribe so you don't miss the rest. 2. Bedford TL. By 1980, the trusty TK was creaking, so Bedford brought in the TL. The big upgrade? A tilt cab. Mechanics everywhere breathed a sigh of relief. No more performing yoga poses under the bonnet, just to reach a filter. The TL wasn't flashy, but it worked. It covered everything from distribution rigs to heavier duties, giving British hauliers a dependable middleweight in a market crowded with hungry foreign imports. It looked modern enough, but not so fancy that operators worried about scratching it. Spotting a TL today feels like meeting an old classmate. Reliable, a bit boxy, and maybe carrying a few battle scars. They were everywhere in the 80s, from council fleets to builders' yards, doing the jobs nobody else wanted and rarely complaining. 3. Bedford TM. The Bedford TM was the big brother of the TL, heavier, bolder, and made for serious haulage. Launched in the mid-70s but thriving through the 80s, it was Bedford's answer to European heavies. Under the tilt cab, you could find Cummins or even Detroit diesel muscle. Drivers liked the commanding view and the fact that it felt like a proper long-haul truck, not just an overgrown van. Sure, it wasn't perfect, some operators grumbled about parts supply, but once you were rolling, it had a swagger that made you feel you could take on the continent. Even today, when one turns up at a show, heads swivel, the TM had presence. Bold, square, and unashamedly British, it proved that Bedford could build trucks tough enough for the big jobs. 4. Bedford TK/MK. The Bedford TK was already a legend by the 1980s, having been everywhere since the 60s. In its military MK/MJ form, it soldiered on well into the decade, carrying everything from troops to generators. If you grew up in Britain, chances are you saw one rattling through town. The TK wasn't glamorous, but it was reliable. Farmers loved it, hauliers kept them in fleets, and the military practically made it a mascot. With simple mechanics and rugged durability, it just kept going, even when new arrivals looked sleeker. People joke the TK was like a Labrador, loyal, friendly, and always ready to work, even if it occasionally tracked mud into the house. Today, seeing one preserved is like spotting an old friend who still knows how to roll up their sleeves. 5. Leyland T45. Road train. When the Leyland road train hit the scene in 1980, it was a bold move for a struggling British industry. This wasn't just another lorry, it was a statement. We're still in the game. And to prove it, the road train won International Truck of the Year 1981. Drivers appreciated the roomy cab and respectable performance. With options like Rolls-Royce or Cummins engines, it could haul with the best of them. Operators liked that it was cost-effective compared to flashy imports, even if quality sometimes wobbled. The road train became a staple of Britain's motorways in the 80s. Sure, it wasn't perfect, Russ liked it a little too much, but it had a no-nonsense charm. Today, enthusiasts miss it. Not for perfection, but because it symbolized a last big push for British trucking pride. The road train proved Britain still had fight, but the next Leyland was built for everyday graft. Don't go anywhere and tap subscribe to keep rolling with us. 6. Leyland T45 Freighter. The freighter arrived in 1982 as the midweight member of Leyland's T45 family. Designed for distribution and regional haulage, it was the truck you'd spot outside supermarkets or shuttling goods between towns. Not glamorous, but absolutely vital to everyday life. It was practical through and through. The cab was comfortable enough for drivers, while operators liked that it was tough and relatively efficient. It replaced older models like the Boxer and Clydesdale, carrying Leyland's hopes in the fiercely competitive 7.5 to 16-ton market. Think of the freighter as the middle child of the family, never stealing headlines like the road train, but always dependable. Many hauliers look back fondly at it, because when deadlines loomed and loads piled high, the freighter didn't moan, it just got on with the job. 7. Leyland Roadrunner. The Roadrunner landed in 1984, and suddenly the 7.5-ton market had some real style. Its cab looked sharp and modern, a proper step up from the tired little workhorses it replaced. Drivers loved the way it felt less like a relic and more like a truck built for the future. It became the darling of local deliveries, supermarkets, breweries, parcel firms. Everyone wanted a Roadrunner. It was small enough to dart around town, but tough enough to handle a serious day's graft, and the name fit perfectly. This truck was nimble, quick off the mark, and always seemed to be in a hurry. If you ever saw one flash by, you half expected a beep beep as it vanished down the high street. 8. Leyland Constructor. If the Roadrunner was the lightweight sprinter, the Constructor was the bruiser. Built as part of the T45 family, this was Leyland's weapon of choice for tippers, mixers, and anything that needed an 8x4 chassis to carry punishment day after day. Launched in the early 80s, it found its home on construction sites, quarries, and muddy back roads where lesser trucks would simply give up. Its strong chassis and rugged cab made it a favorite for operators who valued durability over finesse. The Constructor wasn't glamorous, but it had that bulldog toughness. It was the kind of truck you could kick, scrape, and overload, and it would still fire up on Monday morning ready for more abuse. Builders and drivers alike miss it because it always delivered the goods, literally. 9. Seddon Atkinson 401, introduced in 1982. The Seddon Atkinson 401 was Britain's idea of a proper flagship. Sleek cab, serious presence, and the option of engines from Rolls-Royce, Cummins, or Gardner. It gave drivers a real sense of pride behind the wheel. Operators liked it because it was flexible. Tractors for long haul, rigids for heavy-duty work, all wrapped in a cab that felt like a genuine upgrade from the 400 series. It was a truck you could live with, not just tolerate. The 401 was everywhere in the 80s, and even now, spotting one at a rally is a treat. Some say it had quirks, but drivers will tell you. Climb into a 401 on a long run, and it felt like Britain could still hold its own against Europe. 10. ERF E-series. By the mid-1980s, ERF needed a fresh face. Enter the E-series, a truck that looked sharp and carried serious clout. With designations like E10 or E12, the numbers hinted at horsepower and made drivers feel like they were handling something special. ERF had always been about practicality, and the E-series carried that tradition forward. It wasn't the flashiest cab on the motorway, but it was solid, efficient, and gave hauliers the reliability they craved. Engine choices from Cummins or Perkins added to its versatility. For many drivers, the E-series was a quiet companion. No drama, no fuss, just steady miles, and a cab that felt surprisingly civilized for a British truck of the time. Today, it's remembered fondly as ERF's last big stand in the UK haulage scene. 11. Foden 4000 series. Foden had always marched to its own drum, and by 1987, the 4000 series showed what they could do with modern flair. The S106 tilt cab was boxy but bold, and it gave the truck a certain toughness that appealed to both fleets and drivers. This was Foden's bread and butter heavy hauler. Rugged construction, strong engines, and that unmistakable British character made it a motorway regular. You didn't see it pretending to be continental. It was proudly homegrown and proud of it. The 4000 series wasn't about glamour, it was about loyalty. Ask any old school driver and they'll tell you it felt like a truck built for the people who actually drove them. Today, enthusiasts keep them alive at rallies, reminding us that Foden still had fight in the 80s. 12. Scammell S26. The Scammell S26 was a beast. Built for heavy-haul duties, it came out in the 80s as a last hurrah for the famous Scammell name. This wasn't your average haulier's truck. It was for oversized loads, abnormal cargoes, and serious grunt. It had a cab that looked purposeful, and under it sat engines from Rolls-Royce or Cummins, giving it the muscle to drag almost anything. Operators valued it for its strength and durability, even if it wasn't winning beauty contests. Sadly, 1988 marked the end for Scammell, making the S26 one of its final products. That gives it an almost mythical status today. When you see one at a classic show, it's like spotting a dinosaur, rare, imposing, and unforgettable. 13. Dodge 50 Series. The Dodge 50 Series was launched in 1979 and became a real workhorse throughout the 1980s. You'd see them everywhere, council fleets, delivery companies, even as quirky minibuses. It filled that awkward gap between van and full-size truck, and it did so with proper versatility. Operators liked it because the chassis was adaptable. You could slap on a box body, a tipper, or even a fire engine conversion, and it just worked. Renault took over later, and the 50 carried on in different guises, but the Dodge badge is what people remember. Spotting one today feels like finding an old toolbox in the shed. It might not be pretty, but it did the job, and often with more character than the polished kit we see on the road now. 14. Dodge 100 Commando. If the Dodge 50 was the handy sidekick, the 100 Commando was its tougher older brother. These medium to heavy trucks were a common sight across Britain in the 1980s, serving builders, hauliers, and even long-distance operators. Underneath, you could find engines from Perkins, Cummins, or Leyland, giving plenty of options depending on the job. Renault eventually rebadged them, but in the UK, the Commando name stuck. It just sounded right, like it was ready for action. They weren't glamorous, but they were dependable. Drivers remember them as trucks that simply got on with life, even if they rattled a bit along the way. Today, enthusiasts smile when they see one preserved, because the Commando summed up 80s haulage. Tough, practical, and a little bit rough around the edges. 15. Volvo F12 globetrotter. While British firms battled to survive the 80s, Volvo quietly stole hearts with the F12 globetrotter. Introduced in 1979, the high-roof cab made long-distance life far more comfortable. For UK drivers heading across Europe, it was like swapping a bedsit for a hotel suite. The F12 wasn't just about luxury. It had a powerful 12-litre engine, a strong driveline, and a reputation for being almost indestructible. Operators loved the reliability, and drivers loved not feeling broken after a week on the road. In Britain, it became the dream truck. Seeing a globetrotter at a truck stop made you jealous. That extra cab space felt like pure freedom. Even now, enthusiasts say it was the truck that made you believe long haul could actually be enjoyable. Those were 15 trucks from the 1980s that once dominated UK roads. They weren't perfect, but each carried its own charm, from the rugged Bedford TK to the luxurious Volvo F12. Today they're mostly memories, with only a handful lovingly preserved at shows, but they remind us of a time when British trucking still had grit, character, and plenty of square corners. Which of these classics do you miss the most? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the road.